Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Regeneration and Housing meeting. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if the fire alarm does sound, please make your way outside. The meeting point is the Cast Theatre. Councillor Pearson, assistance will be provided to get you down there. Can I please ask everyone to make sure your mobile phones are on silent, and there will be filming of the meeting, which will be later used on our council website and our YouTube channel. There's no members of the public here today. I've had apologies from Councillor Noon and Councillor White. Are there any other apologies? No. And are there any declarations of interest? If there are, just make sure you fill in the appropriate forms. And if we can consider if the press and public are to be excluded, and I don't think they are. Minutes of the meeting that we held on the 7th of March, is everybody in agreement that's a true and accurate record? Agreed?
Yes, Chair.
And as there's no members of the public, there'll be no public statements. Can we just do a quick round of introductions before we move on to the other agenda items? I'm Councillor Majid Khan, I'm chair of the committee.
I'm Councillor Irish Beach and I'm Vice Chair of the committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Beanie. I'm here for item 2, the update on Levelling Up Fund.
Good afternoon, Johnny Bucknall, Head of Strategic Investment External Funding, also here for item 2.
Dan Swain, Executive Director for Placing, here for both items, Chair.
Drew Oxley, Head of Trading Services, here for item 1.
Raymond Lynch, Managing Director of Market Asset Management, Doncaster Limited.
Duncan Anderson, Councillor.
Steve Cox, Finley Ward.
Me? Yes. Councillor Pearson, Conisbrough and Dernaby Ward.
Sophie Liu, Councillor for Haxop and Bobby North.
Councillor John Mounsey.
Councillor Jones, you introduce yourself as you're in the meeting. We'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the market asset management presentation. Raymond, I'll hand over to you.
I'll go over there.
If someone could show me how to activate the microphone, which is closest to while the presentation's going on. See if it does. Caroline will show you what to do with that.
Sorry.
That's okay. Is that okay? Right. So Market Asset Management Limited, Doncaster Limited operates obviously the Doncaster Market Estate and Mexborough. The first slide is just the title page with some image of Doncaster Market on the outside market. And there we have some images of some of our traders. Some of them I've known for over 30 years, since I developed the fish market in '92, which is a long time ago, and others are more recent. And basically they are, in my opinion, very, very good traders on the whole. Okay, so since we took the reins at the markets, we've had to contend with some initial sort of issues around accounting. COVID and the fallout from that, although our food retailers did manage to stay open, and also the economic slump that we're just about hopefully going to get out of in the near future. But nevertheless, you know, we have continued to grow as a market estate, and we're going to get on to some actual nitty-gritty of the granular detail in the following slides. Right, I suppose the most impressive is in the last 5 years of tenure, we have doubled income. And we are this financial year, we are due to turn over about £1.5 million. And when we took over, it was about, from memory, about £770,000. That is quite unusual, very unusual within the market industry. You know, I have many markets and consult to many local authorities, and I think many councils would be very grateful to have those type of figures. At the same time, we have rationalised the costs, and we are now running a lower overhead than we were pro rata when we started. Yet we still have 25 loyal employees. Of great significance, we have a dedicated leasing department, which is purely there to find and sign up new tenants, being traders, artisans, food retail, non-food retail, service industries, and kitchens and bars, obviously. And our occupancy rate is currently at 88%. When we first took over, it was 70%. The national average, I think in municipal markets, is in the low 70%. And some markets are actually a lot lower than that, some of the larger ones, the municipal markets. So I think we are doing remarkably well under the circumstances. That doesn't mean to say that you never have traders who leave, and they generally leave for one of three reasons. Firstly, because for whatever reason, they couldn't make a go of it. And that happens. It happens in all walks of life. Secondly, they want to go off and do other things, either retire or a complete change of life. Or thirdly, which is the most frustrating, but actually quite rather good, is that some traders actually trade out of the market up into shopping centres and high street. And that happens all the time. And that's actually, it's rather demoralising for us, but it's actually very good for the industry, because a small independent business has then grown and outgrown us. Doesn't happen all the time. You know, I've got many traders who've been trading with me for donkey's years, really. But we always have churn, which is also a good thing, because when a trader leaves and another one comes in particular in the hospitality, for example, in the wool market, that adds a lot of interest for shoppers coming in. There's something new all the time, and that's recognised as being very important. Some more images there, in particular of the wool market. I must say, when I developed the fish market in '92, they all said I was mad, and it still puts a smile on my face every time I go in there. When I came up with the notion for the wool market 6, 7 years ago, people looked at me with equal sort of suspicion. I think it is one of the most successful food halls in the country. It blends great food, beverages, entertainment, as in the social competitions, the bowling, shuffleboard, 2 stages, and many, many events. And it's quite spectacular. And it does a great deal to the market estate because it brings a lot of people in. And we all know it's largely, not completely, but largely displaced quite a lot of antisocial behaviour. Because where we are busy, and when we are busy enjoying family-based evening economy, people, antisocial behaviour, people don't want to be around there because there's too many families and things like that. We are not a sports bar, and we've always said we want to be for family-based evening economy. And we do very, very well at that. And I think it's probably one of the largest food halls in the country, despite the largest one just opening in Sheffield, which is actually about 7,000 square foot smaller than ours. Sorry, a little bit ahead of myself. This is the slide for the wool market. We generally trade at pretty much full capacity. If you go in there today, you'll notice 2 units are empty, but we have 2 new people signed up to take those 2 empty kitchens. So again, if the whole estate is about 88%, the wool market is generally 95–100%. Again, which is quite spectacular, and I think and really should pay tribute to the staff we have there and our leasing department. Slide. And that's just an image of somebody pouring a drink in the wool market. Obviously, the next big development, the Corn Exchange. I presume most of you or some of you have been in there. Well, I do remember a little anecdote when I finished the fish market, whenever it was in 92, 93. I was driving to work, and on Radio 4 there was this story on the news in the morning that Doncaster market was burning down. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? But it was actually the Corn Exchange then, and they put in that horrible mezzanine. But now it's all been cleared out, and it's looking truly spectacular. Thing is, what do you do with such a wonderful asset? We didn't think there's any point in doing the same. You always have to do different. We did the fish market. Okay, it was already a fish market, but it's now probably the best fish market in the world. We did the wool market, which was just going to be a replacement of the old wool market, which is now a wonderful hospitality place. And what we spent a lot of time thinking about, what does the building deserve and what is missing in the city centre. And we have started the pre-letting campaign. The first open day is next week, 15th, I think, or 19th. We've already got 15 people interested in taking space. But we've decided to be incredibly selective. The space in the middle will be largely for events, whether that's be pop-up markets, more community-based events, or whatever. But we're also going to focus on some more higher-end aspirational events, because everybody is aspirational. You know, I developed Crew Market years ago, and there was one trader in it before we really developed it. People saying, what can you do with this? But everybody aspires to something. So we're going to put in there there are 10 retail units. They will be higher-end boutiques, service industries, hairdressers, beauticians, barbers, fashion, millinery, luggage, that type of thing. And we will also explore these more, not exclusive is the wrong word, I don't like exclusive, but events that are not normally found in the city centre that you'd normally have to go to the racecourse for, or places like that. And as I said, this is just about to kick off. It's difficult pinning down the opening date. The contractors are still on site. There have been several hiccups, as you know, finding bodies underneath the floor and things like that. So things have been delayed somewhat. And we're in the process of identifying when it will launch and how it will launch. The problem the market industry has, any retailers, is the kipper season, which is January, February, March, when business is very, very low. So what we don't really want to do is launch new businesses in December for them to struggle in the first quarter. So what we may do is launch events before Christmas to celebrate the building and then begin to populate in the first quarter of next year. It's still up in the air a little bit because we haven't got a fixed opening date or handover date, but that's the plan so far. These are some of the images from the pre-letting brochure, and they include things like, highlighting the galleries, which is the space upstairs, a wedding venue, and this is obviously for a venue for banqueting. Now there's a kitchen going in there. We can have outside catering, and we have the wool market for those more, urban type of trendy weddings. Lots of events, and I said the retail. There's no point putting PPE and ironmongery and broken biscuits in there. It won't work. You won't get the people in there. They can go elsewhere. They can go in Goose Hill. There's a market for those, but we don't think it's in here. Mexborough, as you know, we took it as part of the Doncaster bundle, if you like. Personally, I think it's in the wrong building. There's nothing wrong with Mexborough. It has its challenges, but every town in this country has its challenges. But everybody's aspirational, as I've said. The location isn't great. It's behind the high street. You have to find it. The rent levels there are low. And in a nutshell, you know, pounds, shillings and pence, it brings us in £55,000 a year in income, and it costs us £320,000 a year. And that is the magnitude of the problem. Perhaps one of the ideas would be to bring those market traders out onto the high street more for better visibility for them. The whole issue is a bit more complicated than that. But we have repeatedly invested time and money in Mexborough, but it seems if you invest £20,000, you get £10,000 back. It's always been a bit of a challenge. And we get quite a lot of churn there, despite the low rents and the great rental incentives we offer. And that's the last slide. It's a picture of a very, very busy wool market with a few hundred people in there, and you probably know quite regularly we max out on the footfall count in there. We have to close the doors, and it has proved to be a remarkable success for families. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Raymond. I'll open up some questions. Councillor Beach, you've got a question?
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Corn Exchange, can you tell us more about how you are attracting retail vendors and what type of retail vendor? I know you've touched on it, but could you elaborate, please?
Hi. Yes, well, we have, as you said, we trawl social media and online databases to search the contact details of local and perhaps regional businesses that we think fit the bill. And they are, as I said, fashion, boutiques, service industries such as hairdressers and things like that, and that type of business. We have a very efficient team, and it is dedicated purely to leasing in Doncaster. We have launched some open days, the first of which is next week. By all means, if anybody's interested in coming along, then just let us know through Drew and come along to that part. This is a pre-letting specific open day. So we've got, I think we invited 25 people so far, 15 have acknowledged, and there'll be more than that. This is just the first round. Okay. Then we do social media advertising on Facebook and door knocking and visiting around Doncaster and literally asking people whether they're interested. But we are being quite limited in the outlook of what we are looking for. As I said, we need to be specific. Otherwise, you can end up with, we could probably pre-let it tomorrow with people selling products that we don't think will go in there, but that belong in the rest of the market. So we need to be very focused so we get a very unique selling point of what the Corn Exchange will do. Does that answer your question?
That's fine, thank you. But also, can you tell me the occupancy across the market, what is being done to retain current vendors, aware that some have left, and attract future vendors, and what are your projections?
I sit on the leasing meeting every week, as well as holding other meetings and phone calls during the time all the time. We take exactly the same approach we do for the Corn Exchange as we do for the rest of the estate. Now, there are some hot spots on the estate. It's never that difficult to find incoming tenants for the wool market. Although we have become quite selective lately, we don't want businesses to come in to fail. As a responsible landlord, that's of no interest to us. We don't want people to get into trouble. So we do sort of do some fairly strenuous financial checks. We get their business plans, their shop fitting plans if appropriate, before we even agree heads of terms and then enter into a lease. People do go, and generally they tend to go in the areas that are the cheapest. For example, Goose Hill, it's always been a struggle. I don't know, since it was built, probably. No, not since it was built. But those units in there, they don't get the footfall that, for example, the Fish Market, International Food Hall, and the wool market get. So even though rents are lower there, we do get quite a bit of churn there, no matter what we do. So the way we attract them is we proactively go looking for traders all the time using those same methods. On my phone, I get 2 or 3 applications a week, and they go straight through to the lettings department. Once we have them, we try and help them to make sure that they are performing correctly, make sure we give them help and business support wherever we can. If they get into trouble with their rent, we talk to them. It's always important to talk, to try and discuss, payment arrangements and things like that. So we support, we're never like any traders going, as I said earlier, some go for the good reasons that they've outgrown us, which happens. So we look after them. We have got very high occupancy rates compared with the national average. I'm very proud about that. The only other one of my markets that is more is Crewe, where we have 100%, but it's just the nature of the town. You have to bear in mind, I think Doncaster Market is probably the largest in the country. Bury Market is very big outdoors, but the indoors is only 25,000 feet. The Doncaster Market estate is probably the largest and will have probably some of the best letting ratios available.
Yeah, please come in.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. When you've got to your 88% of rental lets, when they've gone, you got to that point, did you, by removing stalls?
Sorry, I don't understand.
The percentage of lets was obviously the voids were pretty high when you took it over. So you've got that down by taking some stalls away. That's how you got to 88%.
When we took over, the only difference physically between now and 5 years ago is the corn exchange. Okay, so we've moved those traders into Goose Hill, but those units are now empty. So it's sort of like for like, really. The traders we moved out of the corn exchange, it's compensated into empty units, has now created empty units in the corn exchange. So I'm not quite sure. Bearing in mind that by the time we took over, the Irish Middle had already gone. So the day we took over, we were on 72% or something. So I don't think by moving traders out of corn exchange to Goose Hill changes anything. It might be 1 or 2 units.
I think what Councillor Cox is trying to ask is, since you've took over, has there been a physical reduction in the number of market stalls, which then could affect the figures of occupancy? Is that correct, Steve? Yeah.
Okay, all right, I think I understand. No. The empty spaces that you might see, for example, in International Food Hall, if that's what you're alluding to. No, no, I don't think so. I can't think of any particular instances, for example, where there is some space that's been cleared in International Food Hall that is still available for short-term lets and pop-ups. It's still on our letting schedules as void.
Sorry, but I'll take that.
Councillor Cox, can you pull your microphone a bit?
Sorry. Yep, I'll take that. But I know that some went. But obviously, your word's gospel. It's your running market. When you say about talking to traders and supporting them with rents and things like that, are you aware of a recent survey that 71 out of 79 stallholders want the market brought back in? Are you also aware that the traders are leaving the market to go to retail units because they can't afford your rent? That is one of the biggest reasons why they're leaving. Obviously, the council has the maintenance stuff for it. There are issues with some of the stores, as Drew knows. We've taken it to him. I hope you've addressed some of that, Drew. But what are you doing with working with the council to try and keep these people in the market? Because they just can't afford the rent.
Both of my parents and all of my grandparents are market traders, and they were never happy about anything. But that's been a bit flippant, perhaps. I think, I've been in the market industry all my life, and I have several hundred traders on my books, and I have spoken with tens of thousands of traders. They are never happy. That is the nature of market traders, and they're great people. Otherwise, none of us we wouldn't exist. The rents have been increased over the years in exactly the same way as the council has increased our rent by the same percentage. We have not made a profit yet in Doncaster, okay, or Mexborough, obviously. It's not as if we are profiteering, because we are not. Generally, our rents across the board are national average-ish. There is no such thing as a national average, I'm afraid, because some markets are very high and some markets are very low. So the average doesn't really make any difference. The traders who do leave to go to retail units generally are ones who benefit from being in a retail unit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's always upsetting to see them leave. It's always upsetting to see traders leave anyway. Some traders leave because their business is depressed, because they're not taking as much or as making that profit as they used to, because their product range may not be as relevant to the current shopper that we're trying to attract as it used to be. You know, when I was a kid, markets were supremely busy, and it was the way of going shopping. What we face now, and what we have managed to tackle quite well, unlike many other local authorities, is that our shopping base is younger than it used to be, and also there are more affluent people as well as the existing shoppers there. In many other places, the age of the shoppers is getting older and older, and those traders catering for those, there are fewer and fewer shoppers each year for natural reasons. And we're counteracting that to an extent, but there are still some traders who only, their product range, I'm trying to be polite, their product range is very limited. We don't like seeing anybody. We don't think that we've put anybody out of business because of high rents, because I don't think they are high rents. I think they're fair, and they're rents that we have to charge. Now, we do offer incentives as well, you know, and sometimes we will do some concessionary rents if somebody is, for a particular reason, if somebody's struggling.
Mr. Lynch, you mentioned that the rents have been increased as a result of the local authority imposing rent increases on you. And my understanding was that with some of the stallholders, you've changed over to a model where a percentage of revenue is now charged as opposed to rent. Now, was that something which was sanctioned by the council or implemented by the council, or was that a decision that you took as an organisation?
Thank you, Chair. The wool market is what you're referring to, and when that was established, all traders were on a turnover rent, which was about 6 months before we took the reins. Now, those turnover rents were very low in order to get the business up and going, and they were like 2 or 3% or something of their turnover. The national norm for hospitality food halls is between 20 and 25% turnover rent. So we haven't changed we haven't changed those leases at all. We've just now modified those rents upwards. Now, all new businesses coming in go automatically onto 20%, and they are coming in, and they're doing very, very well. The existing traders, we're staggering, and the second phase of the stagger comes in later this month, and there'll be another phase next year. And they all seem to be catering very well with that. So, and we've spoken with, each time we propose a change, we talk with the group at the council.
But that increase from 2% to 20%, was that something which Drew's team and the local authority asked you to do? Was that something that you took as a commercial decision?
Yeah, it came from us. It was a commercial decision. And it's staggered, obviously, for existing traders, but it brings the wool market up to nearer the national average.
Going back onto the help that we're offering stallholders and traders and vendors. So if we have a vendor on there that, I mean, if it's based on turnover, you can estimate kind of from margins, if you've been in the industry for that long, you know, how viable a business is. So by going upwards and putting somebody onto 20% would mean that their business would no longer be viable. Would you then not do that? And with some of the incentives that you can offer, would you defer that increase in rent until a time where it'd be more viable for that business to operate in that way?
For the existing traders, effectively, that's what we've done. by phasing it over 3 years, I think. And for new businesses coming in, then they know straight away what the rate will be.
No, I understand that. My point being is existing traders who are there, and there's a new set of increases which are due to land. Would you defer those, taking into account you already know what the revenue they're generating? So would you defer that if that would mean that business would then no longer be viable and it would lead to another void on the market and another business leaving? Would you defer that, or would you stagger that, or would you reduce it?
Yeah, it only applies to the wall market, and if there was a valid reason to discuss with the particular tenant a different type of arrangement, then that would definitely be considered. However, we need to be very transparent and equitable. That's my golden rule, that if we do it for one, it has to be justifiable for all. So, for example, if we stagger one more than the others, then there has to be a very valid reason for doing that. Otherwise, everybody will want it, and the whole business model begins to collapse. We don't get, the only churn we really get in the wall market is people moving up and out. You know, that happened with the pizza and burger place, and good luck to them. You know, we don't tend to get too much of a churn in there, apart from business models that I can think of one that was one of the very original ones we inherited. Their business model wasn't as strong as some of the others. But generally, things flourish in the wall market, and traders do as well. And when they do leave, it's sometimes for other reasons.
Good to hear. Councillor Cox?
It's just back to COVID relief. When the traders, just about every trader, obviously they had to pay your rent during COVID when they were closed. They weren't earning any money. A lot of them aren't VAT registered, a lot of them weren't bringing any money in. Why? I mean, you claimed your company, your business, were receiving COVID money. The traders couldn't receive it, and yet, so it led to quite a few traders not coming back. Why did you not give them a bit of leeway? Because obviously everybody was struggling.
We spent time with every trader explaining to them how they got their relief. And once they had their relief, that relief was destined to help pay their commercial rent. So I don't think there's any one trader who wasn't offered and didn't get those explanations and help how to get that relief.
Just quickly, Chair.
Councillor Cox, are you asking about actual financial incentives or reductions on rent during the COVID period?
COVID, but just finally, yeah, and then I've done it, and I promise. Is I've got 36 letters from traders because, similar to you, a lot of family, friends have been on that market forever. And I've got all these letters from traders telling me exactly what happened during COVID, and it's not what you're saying.
What can I say? If you'd like to share the letters or somehow redact, any particular details, we'll certainly have a look at that. But our principle was, and we obviously, it was a major catastrophe for everybody, is that the traders who stayed open, the food traders, I'm not sure whether they had relief or not, okay, but they stayed open and actually traded quite well. And we actually had problems with the police because of the queues. But all the other traders, we made sure that they knew how to get their relief, okay, their financial payments that were then part of which could be used to pay their rent. And we certainly did not precipitate any actions against any traders during COVID. That would have been rather ruthless. But if you want to share some data after, absolutely, I'd like to look at that.
Dan, I'm sure our business Doncaster team and Chris Dungworth would have been given appropriate advice to all our businesses in Doncaster and traders and anybody who did approach us, and the additional support which was available at the time.
Yeah, it was across the board, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, we on. Good afternoon. I'm a little confused about, with Mexborough and where you're at and what you can do. I think it's moved in my lifetime at least 3, if not 4 different locations. And only when there was good footfall in Mexborough, when there were lots of shops, did it do any good. So my concern about, as long as it stays in that building, its existence being profitable or viable even is of one concern, and the other way round is the wool market and artisan marketeers. I cut my teeth in a place called Apenny Green in the West Midlands, and artisan stores that existed then always stayed short periods before they were off into retail, because that was always their ambition. So are you expecting in those circumstances hefty churn because of the short-termism of them before they reach either collapse or moving on to retail? And also with the bull ring, at one point there were masses of live entertainment that generated a small fortune back in its heyday. So are you actually going to have a real performance space within the building that will offer opportunities for all genre of entertainment for local people to visit there? I think I'll leave you with those three questions for the time being.
Thank you, Councillor. There's quite a lot there. I redeveloped the bull-ring markets many, many years ago, and it's an absolutely amazing place. Mexborough, as I said, I think it's outgrown its heyday. We have tried over the last 5 years, every time we repopulate it and we top up with new traders on very lucrative deals, like heavy rental incentives. Each time we manage to get it full. 3 months later, we're down to 60% again because people can't seem to make it work there. As I said earlier, our income is about £55,000 a year from Mexborough, which doesn't sound bad, but it costs us £320,000 a year, which is incredible. You know, an accountant would say, just increase the rents by 500%. Then you'd have zero occupancy very, very quickly. Personally, I don't think it works there anymore. No, I'll rephrase that. It doesn't work there anymore. I think you can try and put events in there, which we've tried. You can try all sorts of things. We've got artists in there at the moment. We have a different cafe. Each time you can't get above the rental limit, the income limit, but the occupational costs continue to grow. Nowadays, I think it's because it is... shoppers are very, very fickle. I have designed a market before with the entrance 20 metres in the wrong place, and it failed. But shoppers are fickle. I think it needs to be brought closer to the high street, where people can see it, people can access it. And I've spent my whole life promoting the home of localism. Small independent businesses, independent food, independent services, artisans, makers, kitchens, the whole thing. I've never let any space to McDonald's or Next or anything like that. I only deal with local businesses. And it could work in Mexborough, but it needs to be very easy for people to see and to understand. And at the moment, it is not. It's in a very tired building in the wrong part, fronted by empty retail units and a square with horrible stalls on it that isn't, most of the time looks horrible, on a reasonably busy high street. So I think the future is to move it forward to the high street. I'm sorry, have I answered all of your questions? Because there was quite a lot in there.
I think you have, yes. Thank you, Raymond. Talking about Mexborough, when you guys took over the market and the estate in 2019, was this not factored in to your proposals? And you talk about that, how Mexborough was horrible. I'm sure many would disagree with you on that, but was that not factored in when you did your assessments on how it is, how it operates, and the operating loss that potentially you were going to have?
Yes, it was. When it's horrible, I don't mean Mexborough is horrible. It's not a bad place. The actual building where the market is doesn't work anymore. It's no longer fit for purpose. Yes, it was. The figures were factored in.
And the not fit for purpose, was that the same in 2019 when you guys took over?
Probably, yeah.
And was that not something which was raised at the time or factored in?
The figures that we adopted were very different to reality.
Are they the historical accounting anomalies that you're referencing? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit, please?
We obviously went through the tendering process, and there were figures that were presented and questioned about income and expenditure of the whole market service ad nauseum. And after 2.5 months, I got the first 2 months trading figures through, and I didn't understand them. The income was a lot lower than we'd been told, and the expenditure was a lot higher. And we've been working for the last 5 years to claw all that back.
Councillor Cox.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, Raymond. Thank you for that. Because we've been told through callings, through all kinds of different things, that the council was losing £500,000 a year. Correct? True? Now, if it were losing more than that, why were we not told about it? Why, when we did the calling, were we not told about it? If the evidence that was submitted to you, that was obviously wrong, surely that would cause a break in the clause because it's wrong. So that loss, obviously, a lot of it was through Mexborough. You focus mainly on Doncaster, where you've managed to gain, funds have come from central government to obviously do a lot of the work round. When you talk about your part in playing development of markets and different things, are you talking about yourself as Quarterbridge, or are you talking about yourself as MAM? Because again, during the beginning of all of this, we asked the question of, was MAM Rochdale, did it have any connection with MAM Doncaster? We were told, no, absolutely none at all.
Councillor Cox,
just one second.
Just one second. Councillor Cox, please. For the purpose of this meeting, MAM Rochdale and MAM Doncaster Limited, they're two separate entities, and we're here to talk about...
MAM Rochdale don't exist anymore.
In that case, it's not relevant to this meeting then.
What I'm saying is that if the authority has given the company the wrong money, the wrong figures, the company has taken this on with the wrong figures, surely that's wrong.
I expect that Drew and his team would have clarified figures and ensured that the correct data was provided, and I'll let Dan come in.
Thank you, Chair. I can't comment on the history because I wasn't here. What I can say is that markets has come under my directorship in the last 12 months. I think it's fair to say that we remain committed to working with MAM. There are complexities within the arrangement. There are challenges within the industry. But I think this authority can demonstrate that it's remained committed to the city centre market, and it remains committed to the market in Mexborough, but that's not without its challenges. I think it's useful that we've got the LUF item on as well, because what that will demonstrate is not only commitment to the market in Mexborough, but wider, because I think there are some other challenges within Mexborough, you know, and I have had conversations with traders from the town centre market, and I've also had conversations with people in and around Mexborough from the businesses. But I am conscious that history I can't change, you can comment on it, but I think what we need to think about is progressing and the way forward. I think what it demonstrates here is that the market is unique. It is successful. Some may have a view on that. It is a cornerstone of our city centre and the plans for it going forward. I do think that we can use it more for that city centre offer and vision as a place. And again, I think that's timely because we've got longer term town plan money coming through. And I think what we can be better at is representing how the checkerboard of the city centre and its investment and development fits together for an offer as a place beyond what is retail. Because the reality is retail isn't necessarily why people come into city centres anymore. It's about that mixed offer, and that could include things like the market, it can include things like residential, and it can include a lot of things like events as well, and how we bring some things together. So I think from this scrutiny panel's perspective, that's something to perhaps think about And one thing you might want to keep an active eye on is the development of the city centre vision and how it pulls it together more as a place that you want to go to and visit rather than just somewhere you nip in to do your shopping and nip out again. Because the reality is those days have changed. Those days have moved on quite significantly.
Councillor Mounsey.
Thank you, Chair. I remember the debate what Steve mentioned there about when it comes to scrutiny, I think, if I'm right. Sorry. I remember the time when Steve mentioned about when it comes to scrutiny in the call. I'm not quite sure, I could be stuck, but I was chair of the scrutiny panel, management committee then. And there was a lot of debate, and good honest debate in there, about the situation with MAM, at the time MAM, about that one and the one at Rochester. But surely, and I put it to you, Raymond, when you looked at the possibilities or the possibility and options of the situation of the market in Doncaster, but I'm talking specifically now about Mexborough. When you did your market research, if you did so, I hope you did, and you did a business plan as well, you should have found out there that the Mexborough market at the time was causing the big problem there for Doncaster Council. I think Drew back as well, that it was losing money left, right and centre then. So it was losing it then. And you tried, you say you're the best, I can't fault that to turn it around. But if that's the case, if Doncaster, like Dwayne just said there, it's coming on the market, it seems to be picking up, it's doing well, it's on the right road. But what can we do to get Mexborough in there? Because Mexborough is one of the deprived areas in Doncaster. And every area, not just deprived areas, would like to have some kind of market. I think what they want. What plans have you got where we can look at if it needs a new site? Are you looking for one between you and Drew in Mexborough? Because if we are, it could be a godsend for the people in Mexborough. So could we look at that as well?
Hi. The first part of the question, yes, of course, we understood at the very beginning that Mexborough didn't earn any money, but it was seen in the whole. Okay, it was just seen in the whole. So that's fine. Yeah, if you want to go down to some microeconomics, you could say that Goose Hill doesn't earn any money. Doesn't mean to say you close it, but there are just some elements that are busier than other elements. I think I'll hand over to Drew about Mexborough. Every town can support a market. It just needs to be the right market in the right location. I'll probably leave it there.
Just before Drew comes in, I mean, I think that Mexborough, aside from the focused discussion about the markets, I think there are some challenges within Mexborough city centre that we've had and that we are addressing, but I think there are some that we need to think about how we address. So examples I'll give you is we had to remove the flyover, and that's presented us with a challenge, and we've got some transport funding to look at what we can do now to better the transport or the connectivity within Mexborough. The other problem I've got is we've got a multi-storey car park there, which has a rather historic legacy arrangement and is deteriorating and perhaps hasn't got a sustainable longer-term future. But what I would say is I'm tied into an arrangement for some considerable time. So I think there's quite a few pieces on that checkerboard within Mexborough that we need to make sure we join up. Because what I'm also conscious of is there's significant investment going into Mexborough for transport and potentially under LUF. What we don't want to do is find that we invest and regenerate but have pockets that are still left without a solution. So I think it's a really good challenge and a really good point that's been raised. And I would reiterate my commitment to working with MAM, to working with Drew, to working with relevant colleagues in the council and also the traders to see what can be done. Because what's apparent from this discussion is that markets don't stay the same. The industry evolves and we need to be moving with that evolution. And what I would say is, to kind of end my statement on a positive, I think the market, particularly the city centre arrangement and the authority's investment in the Corn Exchange, is something that many councils would want to have within their city centre.
Chair, it just, I accept what you're saying, but the next agenda item is levelling up fund. if you're looking at that like I look with my glasses in this, that is a godsend for every community within Doncaster to use if it's used properly and looked at seriously. It's what some will get less, some might get more. But inside that levelling up plan, are you looking seriously at possibilities of Bexborough finding a site there and using the levelling up fund to create a site somewhere in Bexborough?
I think we can come on to the levelling up uses because it's not expressly targeting the market funding, but the reality is or the market options. But the reality is irrespective of what funds are available and can be used, and quite often that's setting parameters by central government, as you know, which has changed recently. We would want to maintain that commitment to looking at options within Mexborough to retain a market facility, but make it better in terms of the consequences and the finance issue that Raymond's identified. So yes, we are actively pursuing, but at the moment, I don't have solutions, but I think it's something that we'll continue to work on. And again, if that's something that we need to come back here as part of the wider evolution of Mexborough and the town centre of Mexborough, I think that would be quite useful.
Would that be, just the last sort of only question, Chair, would that be with the public in Mexborough and also the ward members in Mexborough? Because, you know, we need to be open and honest here with these people.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of engagement on the levelling up fund, both in terms of the initial levelling up proposals and then where we are now. But I think we can explain some of that in the item that we do next. So yeah, there have been public events. As a precursor to the public events, I've been engaging regularly every few months with the businesses as well there. We also had, if you remember historically, the Mexborough Master Plan, which involved quite a lot of dialogue with the public. And we've also got to go back to the businesses and back to the public now with the emerging arrangements for LUF and also for some of the transport stuff. So Mexborough's getting quite a lot of significant investment and engagement, but there are some pieces, as I say, on that checkerboard, which I still think we need to find some solutions for. Markets being one, car park being another.
Yeah, I think we're straight into the next agenda item, aren't we? Councillor Pearson and then Councillor Jones.
We're working. Yeah, okay. Actually, to go back to my original question, I also asked about events. Now, Dan's just mentioned some comments about the car park and historic things.
Councillor Pearson, but let's stick to what's on the agenda around the market.
No, the market and it is on the agenda, Chair. I'm sorry. You may not remember Mexborough when the market was the car park and what have you. And deals were struck.
You give my age away at every single meeting. I don't know if I should be glad for that or I should be upset at you. And you give your own age away as well, I think, at the same time.
I do indeed. I remember when Mexborough and Conisborough were independent states. So I'm going back, Dan, you've just mentioned the car park. And when I spoke earlier, I said about there being at least 4 locations of the market previously. And each time that somebody has wanted to do something, we've dug up issues about a corrupt builder, RAF, various other things that seem to make it difficult and painful to do anything. So my first comment is, can we have a candor arrangement, which is Parliament is now seeking with its civil servants, that we get a good explanation about what the car park issue is, because I remember some years ago somebody wanting to move the market forward onto the high street, exactly what's just been talked about, and then somebody saying there was a highway issue. And it died.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure if there were any corrupt builders over the years that we were aware of, we would have reported those to the police, won't we?
They served a criminal sentence, Chair.
I'm sure they would. I'm sure they would have. Yeah, and that's what I mean. So if there was any corruption, it's something that we would have been fully investigated and would have been reported to the relevant authorities. Dan.
And it was dealt with by court, and there were comments made in court And that's why I'm raising the matter.
Councillor, you're straying into areas which we shouldn't be going into, so can you please turn your microphone off, please?
I would like to know if we're out of that issue.
So I can only deal with facts. And the facts in relation to the car park are that we are tied into what is a legal arrangement. And that requires consideration because it has financial implications. You started your point, Councillor Pearson, quite rightly, with difficult and challenging. A significant element of my world, I think it's fair to say. So the car park is something that we are looking at, but it's not going to be without some challenges. I can't comment on historically how the authority got tied into that relationship. All I can do is work within it, and it's what I've got. So I think longer term, we need to think about what the options are for that big chunk of concrete in the middle, which I think we are looking at, and we're not chipping away directly at the concrete, but we're chipping away at solutions, but it's going to take us a bit of time.
Dan, if you were made aware of any corrupt builders, what action would you take?
Well, it depends on what was said and alleged and the evidence behind it, but generally it would be involvement of the police. I think what's been alluded to is that this was done quite some time ago, historically, and I don't intend to comment on that any further, other than to say factually what I've got is a contractual lease arrangement, which we need to think about, because while ever I'm paying that, and we've got that arrangement in place, the car park isn't improving and will remain a latent legacy. However, the problem I have is there is a legal agreement.
And talking more widely about the local authority, if any allegations of corruption were made against any of our officers or any of our contractors, what actions would you then take?
It would be dealt with in line with the relevant codes and protocols within the Constitution, and also where necessary, South Yorkshire Police would be notified.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just for the point of the two people, Mr Lynch and our director, is that I was part of the original calling and I did a lot of work on that. So you know my background about what I'm sat here, why I'm sat here listening to you now. One of the things that I've listened to, and it's been very enlightening, was your developments for the future and the corn exchange. The question is, have the MAM Doncaster, the management, presented a business plan and model to the council in respect to that development?
Thank you. Yes, we always present a rolling 5-year financial forecast. The last one, which was presented recently, which includes the development of the corn exchange.
Could I ask for to look at the copy of that business plan?
Dan?
I need to take advice from colleagues because I presume some of that is commercially sensitive. Yeah, but we can look at that.
Any other questions? No? Right, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Oh. So do we note the presentation and the information which has been provided, panel? Yes. Yep. Sorry? And the requests made, of course. Raymond, you're more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. And if you choose to leave, that's entirely up to you as well. But thank you for your time today, and thank you for answering our questions. Do you guys want to shift across there and make it a bit easier if you're presenting as well? So agenda item 7 is the update on the levelling up fund. I'll hand over.
Hi. I think if I just do a bit of intro and then we'll throw over to Michelle, who'll run through some bits. I think the original request was just focusing on Mexborough. Could be wrong. Mexborough is 1/3 of the Levelling Up Fund bid, so we have attached slides, I'm sure you've seen, that covers the other two elements. We could talk about them, or we can... Okay, no, that's really useful. So just as a bit of context, hopefully everyone's aware, we developed what is now referred to as our Levelling Up Fund Round 3 bid way back in early 2022 for a submission to government around May of that time. Members will probably recall that the general rule of thumb from government for Levelling Up Round 2 was if you'd been successful in Round 1, you weren't able to get a second bite of the cherry in Round 2. So both bids for the constituencies that weren't central, where we'd already got some resources, were refused. We then received provisional notification of an award for Doncaster North in November 2023, subject to navigating a government onboarding process. That bid was for a total of 17.95 million, which is basically an approval of the exact bid we'd submitted in May 2022, covering Mexborough Moor Ends and a specific element for Broadsworth Miners' welfare. That's useful context for a number of reasons. One, if we'd have been successful in Round 2, we'd have had 3 years of delivery. An announcement from government as late as November with an onboarding process to follow through means our delivery window was reduced to 2. We don't know if that may change or flex given the recent election, but at the moment we're still working on the principle. We've now got a 2-year delivery window and we've got to spend by March 2026. And then there's obviously inflationary pressures. What we can buy with that money now buys us considerably less than it would have bought us back in 2022. And when we were unsuccessful, Dan's alluded to it as part of the first agenda item, there was a number of things that were planned and or delivered that we got on and did anyway using other resources. So as part of that onboarding process, and I'll let Michelle elaborate a little bit further about the specifics, we've had to unpick and unpack what did we originally say, what have we already done, what's the inflationary impact and how much can that money deliver, and then sort of rebuild a package of proposals back together. We've just submitted a validation form, but we're still waiting for a response from government. So as of yet, the award is still provisional. But if that's all right, I'll throw over to Michelle.
Thanks, Johnny. So as Johnny mentioned, as Johnny mentioned, Mexborough is one of 3 sections of our Levelling Up Fund Round 3 bid. The original submission that went in May of 2022 was for 12,531,000. And it was to deliver a certain set of outputs in line with government requirements that we have to make certain benefits visible to them. Those are listed here. It was essentially quite a substantial public realm scheme with a small element of frontage improvements as well. We will be delivering that through a grant scheme for Mexborough businesses. There will be some, well, this was the original scheme, there were going to be some community safety upgrades. A new pocket park was proposed for the location of the former flyover site. Some junction modifications, bringing a prominent heritage building back into use was on the list of proposals. And then we were going to improve some of those T-Town Centre gateways, including the library and market buildings, and integrating active travel links. Like I say, that was for 12.5 million. In the latest submission, it is exactly the same amount that is being kept for the benefit of Mexborough, but the outputs have been unpicked and put back together again. So it is still a public realm works scheme, but the public realm works that were originally proposed have been substantially expanded now. Instead of doing 20 upgrades to shop fronts, we're going to increase that to 80. If the current proposal is signed off by government. There will be new public art, which will also help some of those void buildings, so those will be improved visually from the street. The community safety upgrades are still in scope. We will still do a pocket park, but the proposal now is to move it from the site of the former flyover and put it into the market realm, into the market square. And we will now, because we've rescoped things and removed certain elements, we believe that there's sufficient there to make some significant improvements to Mexborough Library. So we've made an allocation for that. and there will still be improved integration and active travel links. So the scheme has been unpicked. Those bits that weren't delivered initially, where they are considered to still be deliverable within the reduced timescales and within the overall budget, those are still there. But we've got some flexibility if government allows us to progress with this, to actually do something a bit different. I've just set out what some of the key changes are. These are, like I say, these are just proposals still. There's still engagement, there is still consultation ongoing at this point. We don't have the approval from government right now, but the heritage building will now be removed from the scheme. That's for quite a few reasons. One of them being that there was some pushback from central government on that, and the costings were making it seem unviable for delivery within the reduced timescales. Those frontage improvements, there will be more of them, so many more businesses in Mexborough will now be eligible to apply for a grant to improve their shop fronts. The public realm scheme will be bigger than was originally proposed. We'll still do the pocket park, it'll just be in a different place, and the library improvements will be an additional area of delivery for us. We have, as Dan's already alluded to, already undertaken quite a bit of consultation. So the MP for Doncaster North, Ed Miliband, has been engaged and supportive throughout. Elected members have been consulted, and we've done some walkthroughs as well and done some tours. There's been a business forum that Dan's already indicated, and there has been a series of public engagement sessions, and I believe there's still one of those at least to continue. I've just set out some of the timelines and risks. So we still don't have the memorandum of understanding from government. Obviously, it was pressed pause with the recent general election. Hopefully now we'll be able to get going on that and get something through in the next immediate weeks. The scheme detailed design still needs to be worked through in some areas. So we've got these headlines, and we know there's general support from the people that have been engaged with so far, certainly for the majority of things that we've consulted on, but we really do need to get cracking if we're going to hit that March 2026 deadline, unless the new government provides us with a bit more flexibility. As Johnny mentioned, this is one of 3 schemes, so we do have a couple more sections that I'll just run through. This is just for levelling up. So the next section is relating to moor ends. The initial submission was for £3.9 million of improvements. It was quite a, I suppose, public realm, highways, intensive list of improvements. So some street and shop frontage improvements, improved walking and cycle routes, some traffic calming measures, some public art, cycle infrastructure, and street trees and rain gardens and such. When we didn't get Levelling Up Fund round 2, a huge amount of the work that was proposed for Levelling Up Fund went ahead through different delivery mechanisms. So when we were subsequently notified that we had been successful as part of round 3, a lot of the things that were proposed had already been ticked off. It does mean that it gives us an opportunity to revisit it in the light of current circumstances in Moor Ends, and perhaps put a scheme together that is more reflective of community requirements at this point. So just to highlight again, the money that's being held for Moor Ends from Levelling Up Fund round 3 is the exact same amount. 3.93 million is still there. That initial scheme is under review and currently in design phase, but we are in discussion with the MP. All elected members have once again been engaged with, and we do have an active engagement with them and the Town Council. So the next steps for that, again, we need to get confirmation from government that we can definitely have the funding, and it moves more from confirmed funding. And we will still continue to work up some detailed design options, but we have a long list of areas that we believe would be a benefit to the area. There'll be continued engagement and consultation. We do have an open line of communication with the key parties there. The current proposal that's gone into government is for the original scheme, because at the time of the deadline for putting the time the deadline came round, there wasn't enough information to be able to reshape it, and we don't want to hold up the delivery of Mexborough or anything. So we will have to revisit this with government again. Once we've got it all worked out and costed, we will go back to government with what's called a project adjustment request, with our new proposal for what we want to deliver in Moor Ends. And obviously we're going to have to go through all the internal approvals and processes to secure everything as well. I will move on to the end of the presentation. Obviously, you can take questions. If it's okay, I'm going to pass this one over to Johnny.
Yeah, if I just do Brodsworth really quickly, and then I suppose we can take questions. I know Grand Theatre was a question as well, but we can maybe touch on that after some initial questions. Brodsworth Miners Welfare, pretty much status quo from the original bid. It was a relatively small capital investment to improve the fabric of the building, help stop the rot, for want of a better phrase, make some investment and hopefully make it a public building that's usable once again. The main thing that's changed since the submission is actually we should be in a slightly more favourable position. There's now an interested party that would be keen to buy it. I think the trustees are keen to potentially sell it. It's a charity, so there's still some objectives about delivering in the community and making it a community venue. We're just trying to understand the requirements and the processes before we then start committing to resources. But what I would hope is if that goes forward, our investment will trigger hopefully some further investment through that charity and through some other government programmes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. I'm going to first go to Councillor Cox with a question that he's got, or a couple of questions maybe even.
Hey. A recent Cabinet report outlined that any profit must be paid back to Simca. Could you explain how this fits with levelling up? Did this apply to previous levelling up projects? If this is happening, what does it mean for the relation spend across Doncaster?
Thank you. We don't anticipate any profit for Mexborough, first of all, or for any elements of levelling up Fund Round 3. I believe the Cabinet report that you're relating to may have been linked to proposals for levelling up Fund Round 1, which is to do with the waterfront. We don't anticipate there being any impact on Mexborough at all. It's a public realm and buildings improvement scheme. So, as far as I'm aware, there won't be any. Yeah, sorry. The gain share element. We're currently working with Simca to understand how that will all fall out. There's been no grant funding agreement signed yet to have the details of the terms and conditions. So that's currently in negotiation with Simca. But it doesn't relate to Mexborough. So.
Does it relate to Brodsworth?
No. No.
So first of all, through the chair. Second of all, we need microphones on for it to be recorded properly. Michelle, if you want to go behind the desk there, it'd be easier for you, or come back here. And Johnny, do you want to just make that comment again with your microphone on, please?
Yep, sorry, all I was saying is Levelling Up Fund is primarily just a grant for us to make the investments we require. I think the reference to the Cabinet report was linked more to additional resources we were seeking through Simca using gain share, so our devolved resources that we've got access to plug a gap where Luff wasn't stretching far enough for that, partly because of the inflationary cost increase again.
So in layman's terms, so the shortfall that we would have had to get from Simca, then any profit that we would have gained on that, we would have been liable to pay a percentage back. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, rather than the levelling up fund. Yep.
I think if we're talking about a separate scheme, because if you're talking about gain share, you're talking about waterfront matching, well not matching, but making up a gap on some of the LUF, because we didn't have enough LUF to do the remediation and to acquire some of the land within waterfront. So we used gain share to acquire some of that land. There's ongoing dialogue with Simca about that arrangement and how that will work. But you can imagine I'd press quite strongly for that money to be used in a way that gives us agility and freedom rather than restraints. However, it comes with some conditions. I'm not concerned about a repayment of profit. The biggest risk with any of these funding streams, whether or not it's LUF or gain share, is just delivering against a particular timescale or an output. And I think where you need to perhaps focus is that the reality is we've now got here, unless we get something different from the new government, funding that was intended from the initial bid of 2022, now condensed into a 2-year period, which is it's good because we've got the money and it gives us focus, but we don't have the luxury of time like we might have had. So I'll give you assurance on the dialogue with Simca. It's always challenging, but I do have to meet their criteria. That's a reality.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Cox, have you got some more questions?
Yep. When the money is being spent on specific projects, specific geographical areas, how does this impact other geographical areas and issues across the city? For example, improving connectivity. Why were we restricted to bids being put forward to the town centre? I know a lot of these questions don't necessarily relate to just what's on there, but I think it'd be worth understanding.
To come in on that, I mean, I think it's a fair comment because you will get funding streams that become available that tend to be project based. So you deliver something, then how does that impact on the wider connectivity? I think Mexborough is quite a good example of what we've done to try and stitch and knit together some of those separate funding streams. So going back to the comment that I made earlier about the flyover coming out, we then looked at money that we'd got in the pot from what was the PTE, which is now within the Combined Authority, for a new interchange, which had sat in abeyance for a while, but we had a firm commitment from the Combined Authority to do that. We then looked at what we could tip in for the City Region Sustainable Transport Scheme, because we'd had a flyover gone, and we've got a piece of dual carriageway, which I know there are mixed views on that piece of dual carriageway and its effectiveness, but if I go back to facts and deal with the expert opinion, you can make some changes to that. Then you've got bits of land at the side. So we were looking at that from a transport lens, but then we were thinking, well, we've got LUF. So how are we going to link the two together? And if I recall correctly, part of the conversations that we had at that time was linking the transport connectivity for CRSTS and active travel to the LUF funding that was available to maximise the impact. It does lend itself to that argument which I've put before about sometimes the different funding streams, whilst beneficial because it is money, are an added complication and create an awful lot of what would possibly be, I think, unnecessary work. But Mexborough's quite a good example where the authority was forward-thinking in that it started with a master plan. And the master plan is always one of the things that you have to have on the shelf, so when any funding becomes available for transport or for regen or for housing, you can look at what might be available. But it is a challenge for us. It is a challenge for us. And I recognise that there's been comments made about the focus into the town centre, whether or not that's Mexborough or the city centre. I think a fair challenge is, okay, so what next for the other principal towns? And I'd be interested to see what comes out of government, actually, about some of that. But the reality has always been, within my world, in my industry, quite often there is a focus on city centres and urban core, rightly or wrongly, because they are viewed as the barometer for the rest of the outlying area. But I do think there's a consolidated piece that we need to do with the MCA about linking major regen schemes to transport planning.
Just quickly. Thanks, Dan. Just while we're on that subject and with the market there, obviously there's a lot of work proposed for around the market area. Would you not reconsider wanting to be out of there? Because it seems from your slides that you either want it sold off to some social entity, but I mean, you see through levelling up that authorities got its act together working all around there. We knew shop fronts where you said at the beginning, the shop fronts look tatty, everything looks a mess. Not that Mexborough's a mess, I think you said. But
Councillor Cox, I understand your question, but I don't think it would be appropriate for Raymond to come in onto an agenda item which is not relevant to him. I asked him to remain behind just to observe, but I'll let Dan come in.
I'll respond to that. I think what he provides us with is a catalyst and a driver and an opportunity to look at what our options are. But the authority is firmly committed to a market provision within Mexborough, but we've understood Raymond's input onto that, and I value that, and I value the relationship. But I do think there are some things that we can do immediately with LUF and with CRSTS. There's some that are going to take a little bit longer. But as I said on the car park, we are chipping away at some of those. And not the car park in essence, but we're not. I don't have solutions to all those challenges immediately. But what we do have is a master plan. We do have significant LUF. We do have significant transport funding, and we do have significant commitment politically and within the Officer Corps to look at solutions in Mexborough. I think the next challenge is, well, what about other towns and what's going to happen there?
I've got a question about the theatre and the proposal to send it to auction and how that's going to affect any funding applications that we've made or the dynamics of that. If you can just talk about that. If we're...
I can. So as you know, within is it town? I get confused with a mixture of funding. Was it Town Deal? That was Town Deal. So again, you know, I've got LUF, I've got longer term town plan, I've potentially got a levelling up partnership, and I've got 2 Town Deals. So it's a bit of a mix. So I get confused on occasions, and I can't remember some of the acronyms. But if you remember, the principle with the theatre was about looking at options for its future use. Now, there is an aspiration for that to become an all-singing, all-dancing theatre again, but the cost of that was quite significant. So the money that we got was to do some of that, I think, investigative work about what the options might be. My challenge and commitment, really, your challenge you can throw to me and the commitment I can make to you is that we want to have dialogue with whoever becomes the owner of that to see what we can do to bring that back to use. Now, I need to be clear and honest here. Bringing it back to use for a theatre, we've been working with the theatre group, but you're talking significant costs. You know, you're not talking 2 or 3 million, you're talking tens of million. But if we take a step back and look at the art of the possible, because we've got an iconic new office building opposite there, we've got, and that Station Gateway has been a strategic site with us within the city centre for quite some time. What might the options be for the theatre for short, medium and longer term use? Just a couple of points on it. It's interesting that they separated it from the deal with Frenchgate. I think that's quite, you know, I think obviously, so I think that was done on a commercial basis, and I can understand perhaps some of the rationale for that. I think what we need to be clear is we don't want somebody to take that on and just sit on it. What we do have now is clarity about costs in terms of making it wind and waterproof, also taking the asbestos out, and also some options on what might be compartmentalised usage. So, you know, thinking out loud, if you've got a building there which could be made safe and accessible, perhaps not in the short term for the longer term aspiration of a theatre, it does sit quite nicely with a new office block that's presented opposite that might be used for anchor tenants around digital and AI, because currently all it is a blighted empty building that's listed. I do think there's a wider regen piece as well about that old corridor opposite the station, because it's fair to say, and I'm not making any comments about, you know, thoughts or commitments, but there is a bit of a kind of concrete bund with Sainsbury's, and then if you go around the back where you get into Frenchgate. So I think there's some much longer term consideration. But what I would say is firm commitment to working with whoever secures that to help them with the options. I also think it might be interesting to see if the people who've actually acquired the Frenchgate acquire the theatre.
Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it was Michelle mentioned that of a heritage building in Mexborough. Can you tell me what it is or where it is, please?
So in the original proposal, the heritage building was Montague Chambers. Once we engaged fully on that and tried to understand the numbers more, given that there was quite a substantial lapse of time, plus with further engagement for the Department for Levelling Up, who expressed some concerns around us including that in the proposal. The current proposition, which is still out for engagement, is that is no longer progressed. By releasing that from the scheme, the rest of the scheme becomes deliverable within budget, and it allows us some flexibility to make alternative enhancements, such as expanding that shop frontage improvement, so that rather than 20 shop fronts getting the benefit of a grant to make improvements to their premises, we believe we can have sufficient within the budget to expand that to at least 80. and also expand the public realm scheme and do the library improvements as well. But most significantly, it was around delivery of timescales and the anticipated cost, as well as Department for Levelling Up concerns around including that particular building.
So what will happen to that particular building? I mean, we don't want it to just keep falling into more disrepair. Thank you.
Good, Chair, I can comment on some of the dialogue that's been ongoing in and around Montague Chambers, and also dialogue with the owner. So there's a wealth of community feeling in Mexborough about that as a heritage asset. There's also some feelings about the dilapidation and the condition that it's got to. And again, going back to where I started, I can only really deal with facts. So the facts are that it wouldn't be palatable to government for that money to be invested in it, but I concede it is one of the iconic buildings within the city centre, and it is identified within the master plan as being something that we want to do. So I've been having conversations directly with the owner on a no commitment basis that if LUF isn't available, what alternatives might there be? Because if you know Montague, half of it is actually operational and half of it is not, without a roof on. There have been some concerns expressed about its safety and its integrity, which I have to deal with in line with the relevant practices and processes. So that dialogue currently is ongoing. I don't, again, have an immediate solution, but I'm conscious, going back to my example of the checkerboard, you're doing bits here, bits there, but yet you've got this building in the middle. So what might the options be? But I think Michelle and Johnny have explained we can't use, and it's not possible for us to use LUF for it. That doesn't mean that it's not possible to do something else, and the something else is the ongoing dialogue that we've got with the owner.
Yes, fine, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Just more broadly talking about levelling up funding and the feedback that I've had from officers over the years, it almost feels like we're pitted against other local authorities and we're trying to bid in and bring money in, and feedback into the new government that we've got. What would it, I mean, levelling up funding, would you want to change the mechanism in which it operates in, or is this something that you found to be effective and good in the way it delivers funding for Doncaster City?
I'm conscious, Chair, I don't want to kind of stray into the politics, but if you remember, one of the challenges that came out nationally in LUF was that a local lot of authorities spent an awful lot of time and effort and used an awful lot of financial resources to pull together schemes that didn't progress, which is regrettable. And what we don't want to be in a position of with any funding is a beauty parade. That I think that's the reality. It needs to be delivered on common and understood principles. I do think my message back to government, and I think this is something that politically needs to be weaved in at the appropriate levels, is it could be joined up better. I think the challenge, this is not a criticism of the previous government, but the reality is I don't think sometimes levelling up was joining up. And the examples I would give you is, 2 town deals, then an enhanced town deal within the city centre for longer term towns plan, then a potential levelling up partnership, then transport, going back to the point that Councillor Cox raised, transport funding over here, and then of course a gain share. But I do think what Doncaster has better than perhaps some of our peers is that wider plan for investment and growth within the wider city boundary. And I forgot to mention, it was remiss of me, together with all that, we've got the investment zone and 4 sites within the investment zone where there's potentially 80 million across South Yorkshire available. So bringing it together a little bit more, I think, as a funding pot for a place, as a collective pot rather than an individual set and streams of them. And of course I could go on, then I've got brownfield housing, then I've got Homes England funding. So I think anything that they can do to bring it together is better as a place. But again, political priorities will fall out of what the government view as being the areas for investment, and that could mean a shift in some respects.
And do you know, with that joining up, Dan, I mean, are we talking more regionally here as well, or more locally, or even nationally, and trying to get different projects landed at the same time? So I don't know, what I'm trying to say, but so stuff comes together at the same time, so it better develops the whole economy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I agree with you. I think that if I'm selfish, I'm thinking about Doncaster and it being coordinated, but it needs to be more coordinated at a national level and at a sub-regional level. And the piece that I raised was about transport at a sub-regional level as well, because the MCA has a key role in terms of the local transport plan, and the local transport plan needs to be informed by a number of things, doesn't it? You know, modal shift on transport, key sites, connectivity, all that kind of thing. But it'd be interesting to see, we've got a change in government, it'd be interesting to see what now kind of comes out of Whitehall. But what I am also keen to make sure is that wherever we can, we continue to do that stitching and knitting, because no disrespect to central government, but they all work in slightly different ways.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Mounsey, Councillor Pearson, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. It's to deal with Brodsworth Miners Welfare Hall. Go back with history here. I came down to work with Brodsworth Colliery in 1970. That was the same time when Bullcroft Colliery closed, and all them men came to work at Brodsworth Colliery. We had 3,700 men work there. 12 coal faces knocking out 1.5 million tonne of coal every year. The men at the colliery then paid in, at that time, £0.50 a man for the Miners Welfare Hall, which you mentioned here. That Miners Welfare Hall belongs to Brodsworth Miners. It does not belong to CISWO. Does not belong to CISWO. It belongs to Brodsworth Miners. And what we've got here is a situation where we're trying now, they try to sell it twice, these trustees, once without good auction and the second one with auction. And myself and the former councillor, Shed Kitchen, who worked at the mine with me, we objected to it and we got it stopped, it got moved. And then we got Mr. Miliband in on it, and we also have a friend of Brodsworth Colliery working together now. So where we are at the minute, it's a future with the Workers' Education Authority, WEA, that are in negotiations now with all the relevant parties to try and get this building back in the hands for the community to use. And that's where we want to be. It is a community building now. There's no longer miners there, but I'm one of still alive, one of the few. But I'll tell you what, that belongs to Brodsworth Miners. It does not belong to them trustees. Thank you, Chair.
I can take that more as a comment really than a question, but I think that we understand entirely and are cognizant of that strength and wealth of feeling within. Yeah, I do understand that.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. To go back to Mexborough, because everything you do at Mexborough affects Conisbrough and Dennerby. You mentioned about the Levelling Up Fund. There appears to be at least 2 significant planning applications recently lodged that could lead to masses of traffic in and around Market Street, where the flyover used to be. Are you monitoring the flour mill application, and are you also looking at the plans to have 12 holidaymaker flatlets in one of the buildings on the high street, and how these applications may dramatically affect what is a shop front? Because I didn't realise there were still 80 shop fronts in Mexborough's main high street. So I'm just trying to tie the two together. And if somebody's going to turn the flour mill into something like 90 or 100 flats and accommodation, the traffic going on to the dual carriageway in that area, again, would significantly be impacted. And as I say, everything you do on that strip all goes back to the bridge down coming out of Dennerby, and the traffic flows in and out of Conisbrough are dramatically affected. So it would be very helpful if you'd like to comment on what you know and the impact, or are you assessing the impact of these conversions into holiday lets and single-person flatlets in the area that you've mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so it's interesting the feedback you get from some of the business representatives or community representatives when you talk about the flyover and the dual carriageway. because the problem that we've got with the dual carriageway is it ends at both ends. That's the problem. So I entirely understand what you're saying. Yes and yes, to answer your question. So a couple of things. If you do transport modelling at any point in time, it's taken at any point in time. So you do have to think about future potential development, because you're very right, Councillor Pearson, you could get more development which impacts on the transport and the flow. I want to be clear as well that it isn't just about the potential for the carriageway going to a single carriageway. It is also looking about the exit, particularly at the Conisborough end, and how that flows and how you get off and how you don't have to sit there for quite some time. But the experts that we've engaged have indicated to us that it isn't detrimental. And going back to the point on the planning applications, future development would have to be considered as part of that modelling, because obviously it's not just a set in time now, but also on any individual planning applications, as you will know, Councillor Pearson, there has to be an assessment of the transport impact, and that has to be, where necessary, validated, so that we're confident, or we challenge it to be confident that it's accurate and reasonable.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. It's just going back to the levelling up and all the pots coming together. I'd agree with you, 100%. And it's something that I personally, when we did have a kind of a connection in Westminster, that on the group leaders groups, I have been putting exactly that in, because I did, and I do, listen to what's being said and feed that in. Now, if anybody that knows me knows that I'm extremely passionate about Doncaster, and I would do anything I could to try and make it better. So I completely get it, Dan, which is why I asked the questions about things like paying things back to Simca, because anything that is a grant for us should remain a grant for us. So that's the reasoning for me questioning.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a point, listening to all the information you put out about Mexborough originally, about going from 20 to 80 shop fronts, which are commercial properties presumably and are not owned by the council. Who benefits from that development? And it seems to suggest that a previous discussion about the markets was an aspect of involving placing market stalls along the actual main road or wherever it's situated, where these 80 shop fronts will be developed. Can you expand on that at all?
Yes, so I can expand on the shopfront scheme. So you may be aware that we've done similar schemes recently in the town centre around Stott Lane and the surrounding area, as well as in Stainforth. So we've had an officer with substantial experience in delivering these schemes go and look at Mexborough and understand which buildings would be in scope. We believe there could be substantially more than 80, but we're hoping that at least 80 will take it up, accepting that some business owners or commercial premises owners won't be interested. We believe that, well, the grant, assuming that we get approval for all of this, will be administered on the same basis as all other recent schemes. So it will be for shopfronts owners to cost out works that would make improvements to the visual presentation of their premises, and they will be entitled to a grant in the region of £10,000. So that they can undertake those works and they will reap the benefit of it. I'm not sure about your second question, I'm really sorry.
Sorry about that. It was about including the aspect of what we talked about before, was placing the markets within the main street of those premises. Or, as I've wrote down here, there's no action relating to the markets within the proposals. But there was a suggestion that you would have to move the market into a different area to create the market's use. It doesn't make sense to me, in real terms, placing stalls in front of commercial properties on a main street. It's not conducive at all. You know, if you're going to do that type of thing, it's got to be totally separate.
I mean, if I take that more as a comment than a question, but I think the reality is what we've indicated is that we do need to look at the options in and around the market provision. That's the reality, given what Raymond has indicated, and given the fact that we're, as you've pointed out, we're doing other pots of regeneration in and around Mexborough. I don't have an immediate solution, but what I do have is a commitment to maintaining politically a market presence within Mexborough.
Thank you. Can we please note the presentation and the information provided in the presentation panel?
Yes.
Thank you very much for attending. Johnny, Michelle, Drew, Dan, and Mr. Lynch, thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. Dan, I can have a quick word with you once the meeting concludes, if that's okay. If we can move on to agenda item 8, which is the work plan. Thank you, guys.
So just referring to the work plan, it's the first meeting of the Regeneration and Housing Scrutiny meeting today. You do have a raft of areas that we need to put into meetings on page 54 of the agenda. That was agreed at the work planning meeting previously. But just to explain that the tenancy agreement that was on today, that has been moved, and a meeting will be arranged soon, and we'll let you know about that. So that's just to update you on that, and you'll be updated on future panel meetings when we start arranging those items. And also on this is the forward plan. The only item on there I can see is about the town centre submission, and as you know, you recently had a members' seminar looking at that, and there's nothing else at this time. So over to you.
Thank you. Move we note the plan. Is there, any prospect of any of these coming in the, in this current fiscal year? Thank you.
Yes, they're all areas for the work plan for the 24-25. As you know, you've got some dates already in there. Chris and I just need to do our thing and speak to officers, and we'll soon let you know when those items are coming.
Thank you very much for that. So everyone accept that the work plan, and it will be updated as necessary. Right, thank you very much. I think that... Yes, I'll close the meeting and you may all go home. Thank you.